in and out of the Beltway. From large cities to small towns to the rural heartland. From sea to shining sea. This is Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio. Inside the News.
Welcome back to Inside the News. So glad that you are with us. And this is show number 263 in our episode count. And we are at the front end of our 6th year of broadcasting. Want to thank everybody on the affiliates on down the line, SoundCloud, YouTube, and AUN TV for taking us on. But let's say hi to Ben Brunson. He's in the bottom middle. How you doing today, Ben?
Hello, Guy. Hello, Frank. It is a pleasure once again to be with you both.
And Frank, how's it up there in New York State?
Well, I'd like to thank the rest of the world for making sure that we have never had a slow news week since we've started.
Oh, my goodness. Ben, this is unreal, isn't it? What's going on?
Well, as Frank says, there's no shortage of issues and news to dig into, and 2020 is quite the year. Right. You know, the hashtag cancel 2020. I understand that sentiment because it is really very interesting.
Absolutely. Okay, let's just kind of do a little rundown here, Frank. We're going to get started with you. We are halfway through the year 2020. And what Ben was just saying, cancel 2020. What have we gone through so far? What has happened? Soleimani, dead. We got rid of him. The impeachment, the State of the Union address, COVID-19, the economy shut down, sports shut down. Now Broadway shut down for the rest of the year. Millions of cases, over 100,000 lives have been lost. Black Lives Matter. We got the Chaz and the Chop zones. Statues have been defaced or destroyed. The movement to deconstruct history, lawlessness, and crime, unstinking believable. Hey, Frank, go.
Other than that, how did you like the play, Mrs. Lincoln?
That's right.
You know, I think when historians look at 2020, they're going to term it the year of the avoidable tragedy. In the case of COVID, for example, prompt action or appropriate action by Chinese authorities could have prevented this entire worldwide disaster. If we look at dissent within the United States, the riots and so forth, forceful action by appropriate state and local officials could have prevented this from becoming an epidemic from one end of the country to the other. It is indeed the year of the avoidable tragedy.
Boy, it sure is there. And you know something, Ben, we started out this year and we were all celebrating with Soleimani that the terror is dead over there in Iraq. And little did we know what was going to transpire after that second week of January, Ben.
Well, I think the most notable reality of this year so far is that we entered the year looking at Donald Trump cruising to re-election victory. He looked like he was on pace to have a re-election on par with Ronald Reagan's re-election, in which he won 49 states. Of course, that's not on the table anymore. But he was cruising to re-election, and now it is certainly questionable whether he will be re-elected. And a man who clearly has early onset dementia may be our next president. So it is interesting time.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about what's going on with Biden in our third segment. But, you know, Frank, that is absolutely astounding that here you have someone who can't even put one sentence together and he could be our president.
Yeah, it's kind of like just going into the polling place and just putting no decision on your ballot. The fact of the matter is, it brings up a fascinating fact of American politics. And one of the strengths of the Democratic Party has consistently been that Democrats do not necessarily vote for the candidate, they vote for the party. One of the reasons why the Democrats have done so well in so many elections, despite having, frankly, a weak bullpen of candidates on the state, local, and federal levels, is that the loyalty of many voters to the Democratic Party is almost absolute. I grew up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and I can tell you that if you put a combination of Jack the Ripper and Mickey Mouse on the Democrat line against a combination of Albert Einstein, Jesus Christ, Moses, and George Washington on the Republican line, Mickey Mouse and Jack the Ripper on the Democrat line would consistently win.
Boy, when you put it like that, Ben, that's kind of scary, isn't it? Let's talk about the economy shutdown here, Ben, because you're our resident economist here. And that was major for Trump, who built up this economy in March, to just say, I'm shutting this thing down to protect everybody's lives. Now we are facing maybe not only reopening, but maybe reclosing, Ben.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have sacrificed our economy. And I think what will go down historically as one of the great blunders, the decision to completely shut down the economy because of what we have learned since. Now, I guess it's not a blunder in that going into the shutdown, it seemed like the only way to avoid with COVID-19 cases, and that there was some truth to that. However, what we have learned since then, and what is clearly obvious now, is that there are two classes of population. We have to protect the vulnerable class, but fortunately, that vulnerable class, when it comes to COVID-19, is a small minority. It is the elderly, it is people with comorbidities such as obesity or diabetes or hypertension, those types of chronic illnesses, and they are at risk. But fortunately, for the vast majority of Americans, and certainly almost the totality of those under 40, there is no risk to COVID-19 any different than the risk to that's present with normal flu. And we have to reopen the economy. We know that now. I think we're in this push me pull you type of scenario where a lot of governors are in fear over the numbers, but when you dig inside the numbers, what you're seeing is that the spike in cases that we've seen as southern economies have reopened in particular, and even California and other economies, have been among the young. The young are going back and they're doing what young people do. They're going out to bars and having a good time. And COVID is spreading very rapidly through that group because of that activity. But that's the group you want to get COVID and to build a herd immunity within that age group that is not vulnerable to COVID-19. So we have to continue to protect our aged and our vulnerable, but we have to allow this really to run its course, because the pain of having our economy closed is something we simply cannot withstand any further than what we have already incurred.
You know, Frank, it's the psyche of the human spirit, and it's just not Americans, but it's the human spirit that needs people, that needs that interaction. And I know we're going to be talking about Major League Baseball a little bit later, but sports is integral in that. And that has been a diversion for many during, politics or whatever, that they get into the various sporting events, whether it's NBA or racing or football or baseball. And we're just on the cusp of maybe bringing them back. But who knows what's going to happen even with high school in the fall, Frank?
True. And I want to go back to a point that Ben started to bring up, which was excellent. There is a huge dichotomy between the worldview of the professional political class and, frankly, the rest of the world, or rest of the country at least. When we hear politicians, particularly in large cities, say things like, well, it's okay, we can keep business shut for another couple of months, that's the safe thing to do, without realizing that those businesses, in many cases, simply cannot come back. The reality of it is the professional politician who is getting a salary no matter what is shut down has no concept of how this is wrecking the economy. This isn't just closing down the economy like for a vacation for a month or so. This is permanently putting a significant part of the American economy out of business for a very, very long time. And with that goes the jobs that businesses produce. One of the odd things we're seeing from leftist politicians, the liberals, the leftists, and so forth, is that they never seem to make that connection between individual prosperity and financial stability and job creation. They think they can shut down business. Things are somehow going to be okay. We're going to produce yet another stimulus set of checks, which our great grandchildren will be paying for. There's no concept of fiscal sanity in our professional political class.
You know something, Ben, Frank mentions jobs, and you know all the relationship there, but there are many people that I think they would love to go back to work, but they're making more money on unemployment now, Ben.
Well, there's certainly that aspect on some level. Um, but I think people are by and large eager to go back to work. A lot of these unemployment programs will run out. Most state unemployment programs have a limited duration. Now, there will be talk of expanding some of these or extending some of these unemployment programs with federal support. And I think that's the wrong direction, as we've talked about. People need to get back to work. There are problematic industries. Some of these service industries, like the restaurant industries, can be problematic. Bars are clearly the vector that COVID is spreading the most rapidly through. And Florida, for instance, the governor shut down alcohol serving at bars. So he didn't shut down the bars, but he effectively shut them down. And that type of decision makes sense to me. So there will be a segment of the economy that's going to continue to experience a lot of pain. And that's a meaningful segment of the economy because millions of Americans make their living, especially the young, and those types of service jobs. So we're going to have to continue to offer some level of support there. But the rest of the economy and some of the arbitrary decisions made where a Walmart is open because it's essential, but the store next door that has absolutely no functional difference in terms of how it interacts with its customers has to be closed. Those types of decisions make no sense. And I think, fortunately, that seems to be rapidly coming to an end.
This is Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio Inside the News. This is our first domestic segment here. Frank, Ben mentioned a good point about Walmart being open, but other businesses not. And one business that is up there by you is the entertainment business of Broadway. $15 billion will be lost for the remainder of this year by them shutting down. Actors will not be able to get paid. The ticket takers will not be able to get paid. I mean, this is going to be a ripple down effect, and it's quite strange if you go down 42nd Street and it's dark.
Yeah, it certainly is. But of course, if you look at Broadway theaters, the seats are so tightly packed. It's probably somewhat akin to the New York City subway system. One of the reasons why New York City became the planetary epicenter of the COVID disease was the type of transportation nexus that we have in the city. It has been a goal of the left to get us out of our private cars and go on to public transportation, which turned out to be the perfect vector for COVID-19. Once again, a left-wing policy turns out to be disastrous.
All right, let's just change course here for the last couple of minutes here, Ben, and SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, on their abortion ruling with Roberts. This is major, wasn't it?
Well, it's a major flip-flop by Chief Justice Roberts, who 4 years ago was on the other side of the exact same decision in the Texas case, where the Supreme Court 4 years struck down the Texas law, but the swing vote in that case was Justice Kennedy, who's since retired, and Roberts was on the dissenting side. Here, Roberts takes the swing vote with the liberal side and makes the same decision. And he completely reversed his logic. 4 years ago, he talked about how states basically have the right to oversee medical facilities and to establish rules and procedures and laws that they see fit to protect patients of medical facilities, protect the unborn in the case of abortion clinics. In this case, he cited stare decisis, or the principle of case law of prior rulings, as his reason to side with the liberal justices. But what it really means is that once again, Justice Roberts has put the law to the side in order to express his clear ideology that he does not want this Supreme Court to be caught up in the politics of the day. So he is afraid to really take on and address any issue that he feels should be decided politically. despite what the law says. And we saw this, of course, in his decision striking down Donald Trump's executive order reversing DACA, which is one of the worst decisions I've ever seen the Supreme Court make, because it simultaneously says that the exact same action taken by Barack Obama is being upheld. At the same time, it denies Trump taking the same action. You can't have your cake and eat it too in that case. So it's a completely incoherent decision. It was based on technical issues, but it was an incoherent outcome. But it was motivated by the same issue, which is this desire by Roberts to avoid politically damaging decisions as he sees it in his mind. And he views himself as somehow protecting the Supreme Court by doing this.
You're listening to us across the country on our radio affiliates, or maybe on SoundCloud or YouTube. And you're also enjoying us on the AUN TV network, AUN-TV.com. We'll be back.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.